busy, and so thank you. Continue if you, okay. Now, if you don't want your picture to be in the recording, is there a way, Debbie, that they can opt out of the recording only and still participate in the meeting? You're on mute, Debbie.
The only thing I'm aware of would be to just undo your
video.
Just stop your video. All
Yes,
right. If you don't want your picture to be in the recording, just stop your video. Okay. All right, let me start. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the League of Women Voters of the Fredericksburg area this morning for our March general meeting, which features a conversation with the registrars. My name is Diane Shea, and I'm president of our local league chapter. For anyone that may not know, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active, excuse me, participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping measures I want to run by everyone. First, after my introductory remarks, other than the speakers, everyone will be muted during the other than our speakers to make sure that there's no extraneous noise. Second, our speakers will have the floor for the first part of the program, and we'll be answering questions that we've asked them to address to get us started. If there are questions that you'd like to ask, please type them in the chat box. And after all the registrars have had a chance to speak and answer questions, I'll ask them to respond to the questions that you've put in the chat box, as many as they have time to answer. And as I mentioned, please note that the program is going to be recorded, will be posted on our Facebook page, and maybe our website too. We'll decide which location after this is over. And lastly, we expect, of course, everybody on the call to be civil and respectful to our speakers. If you have an issue with something that is being said, please post it in the chat box so that it can be addressed if there's time. Oh, and one other thing, just in case there's any media or press on the call, I'm not aware of any, but to be safe, let me make clear that the call is entirely off the record. Before I introduce the panel to you, I want you all to know that all of these officials were extraordinarily helpful to the League, even during the busiest time of last year's election season. They took time out to respond to our emails and review for accuracy the voting information that we use in handouts and flyers and posters. And they provided feedback on how their offices would be handling ballots to keep them secure. So we are so very grateful for their assistance. Thank you all. The registrars with us today are Mark Hoffman from the city of Fredericksburg, Laurie Gump from King George County, Anna Hash from Stafford County, and Kelly Akors from Spotsylvania County. Welcome and thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Please feel free to make some introductory remarks if you like. And then start us off, if you will, by telling us how is a registrar appointed to your position, and is it the same for every locality? Go ahead.
Mark, I guess I'll start. It is the same for every locality in the sense that we're all appointed by a 3-board member. It isn't always the same in the sense that, like I received my appointment back in 2005 when my registrar retired. Some others may have received theirs when a registrar did not get reappointed. But it's always going to be the same by a 3-board member. And our 3-board member is designated by what the governor is. So for example, we have 2 Ds and an R on our board right now.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, so Lori summed it up correctly. Every registrar is appointed by a local electoral board. Every locality has an electoral board. Its composition is made up of the majority members of that 3-person electoral board is whoever holds the governor's office. That party has 2, while the party that is not in the governor's office has 1. I was appointed when the former registrar unfortunately became ill and had to retire very quickly. And I have the least amount of registrar working in a registrar's office than any of the registrars on this panel. Prior to me being here, I worked in the Fredericksburg Circuit Court Clerk's office. I have worked for the city of Fredericksburg in local government for the past decade.
Anna?
I was appointed when our previous registrar retired. He served out his initial his appointment, and then I was appointed in July of 2019. Prior to that, I had worked in this office since July of 2011.
Okay. And
I'm similar as well. It was the registrar before me had served many years, and in 2008 I was appointed. I had served as her chief deputy registrar, and like Lori and Mark said, it's the same. You know, the 3-member board appointed me after, I think it was 3 interviews that they had when I was appointed, and began serving right before the 2008 election. The biggest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Baptism by fire.
yes. Yes.
Great. Now, what and/or who determines how a registrar and a registrar's office runs an election and carries out the responsibilities of the office?
Well, I'll start. We're guided by law. We're assisted by the Virginia Department of Elections with guidance and support. The Code of Virginia that dominates our world is Section 24.2. But we also, in the Code of Virginia, a lot of things related specifically to elections are really the ground of the local electoral board. So there's a collaborative effort in localities between the registrar, the electoral board, and the Department of Elections, and many other resources to try and administer all the duties required to have successful elections.
Yeah, I think that the day-to-day voter registration, processing different types of applications, the day-to-day office administrative work is conducted by the staff. Doing the election, conducting the election, that is a collaborative effort, which some localities, their electoral board is more involved in that process than others. It just sort of depends on the makeup of the board. Of the electoral board of that locality, how much they get involved. So there is a difference there, but basically they're tasked with a lot of these duties, and then they rely on us to do a lot of them because there are just things that they can't do. But for election day and those processes, it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, to echo
2020 more than ever, for sure.
Yeah, to echo Anna. Yeah, we do have our respective duties, and some boards are definitely better than others. Some boards delegate a lot of their responsibilities to us as well. And, like Mark said, the rules and laws happen on multiple levels, but what needs to be remembered is it varies by state. So many people, especially in our locality, you watch the news and you see what's going on in other states that has absolutely nothing to do with how we're managing our elections. So that's a big reminder, is that it does vary by state.
Lori?
And I echo the same thing. We're also governed by the federal legislation and state legislation as well as our 24.2. But as Kelly said, the biggest issue that we find with elections is that when the news is going, because we border Maryland, I get so many phone calls from residents in Maryland saying, how come we are not, how come you're not open for early voting? And you know, they may be a week before us, and so you know, we're like, don't watch the news. You know, please don't watch the news or call us. You know, but yeah, so that's probably a big issue. But as all of them said, the election process is a collaborative effort between all of us, the board, our staff, our officers of election, and our and the registrars.
Do the elected officials, the Board of Supervisors or the City Council have any involvement? Are there any local government ordinances that apply to your jobs, to your responsibilities?
Not by law. They may get involved. You know, a lot of places now have satellites, and we may have to ask our, you know, Board of Supervisors or our city managers or our county administrators, you know, for property or places that we can, you know, put the satellites. But as far as election day and them for overseeing anything on election, they don't.
I would, yeah, that's Laurie's correct. The one thing that people should understand is the vast majority of funding for registration and elections, our offices are a local funding mechanism. I can kind of compare that to the courts, which gets a huge subsidy from the Commonwealth to support the local circuit court or King George Circuit Court. Whereas local elections offices are almost exclusively funded by the locality. In the city of Fredericksburg, the city council does have some authority through ordinances, which they're engaged in at the moment, which is they are considering an ordinance, which they are allowed to do by law, to change the date of the May election. There is pending legislation now that is likely to be signed by Governor Northam that would move the May 2022 election to November 2022. The City Council for the City of Fredericksburg is entertaining an ordinance now in an attempt to move the May 2022 election to November 2021. So in the city, they are involved. That would have an impact on the administration of elections.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's unique to the city. Probably is unique to places that have or soon had May elections, which are independent cities and towns.
That happening in any of the counties?
No.
No, we don't. Yeah, we don't
We
have
don't
those.
have town elections.
Right.
Oh, these are just, okay, city and town elections.
Mhm.
Yeah, the most recent work I did with our board was like Lori said, when we decided to get the satellite office, it had to be included in an ordinance with the county. So it's just kind of going through the, you know, the steps that you need to do that. And
Right.
then of course, like Mark said, all the funding. We always need that.
Always, always.
Yes.
Okay. Did the, another question, did the agitation and the controversies around the 2020 presidential election impact you and your team?
We had controversy.
What?
Just wondering.
Yes, and we're still getting calls about our voting equipment and who makes our voting equipment. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to end. The calls and the questions have been endless. And it just seems like, I don't even know.
And it's the media, you know,
It
it's the
is.
media that draws it. So again, my biggest thing is if you don't know the answer to something, come to the people who actually work in it and know, because we will give you the correct answer. Don't rely on Twitter, don't rely on Facebook, don't rely on Instagram or whatever all those things are. Come to the experts who
Right.
actually work in it and know.
And if we don't know the answer, we know where to find the
That's
answer
right.
and we will get it to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think with the question, Diane, about the impact of 2020, and we had talked about this amongst ourselves too, that I think it was probably the most difficult of our careers and our employed life.
Yes.
In Spotsylvania, we have a staff of 5, and 2 of those were part-time to serve almost 100,000 voters. Early voting began and life just changed as we know it. We voted about 54% of our total voters during the 45 days before the election.
Wow.
Thankfully, I used a very valuable chief election officials to help run the satellite office. They all knew what they were doing, and we received so many compliments on the operations of it. And while we had abundant new laws, the General Assembly met, they changed laws up until the last minute, which affected all of us. Mental, physical health was a concern for all of us in the state, not just my staff, but there were, it just, when you're working 15-hour days every day, it catches up to you. And then, of course, everything with COVID, you're constantly cleaning, protecting ourselves, other people. It's just, your brain felt like you were constantly doing something, from disinfecting, to handling all the voters and the complaints and the death threats and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Death threats.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Seriously?
yes.
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 Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Not now, just because I have turned it over. I mean, there were a few different instances that have been turned over to the sheriff's department, but
Wow.
even a lot of it through social media. We want to, as registrars, we want to share everything that we've got, all the information we have. So we have Facebook pages, or our locality, has Facebook pages, and you try to get that information out, and everyone's very brave over social media. So I think all of us would work our whole day, get home 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then you're responding to all the messages that are coming in from the information you're trying to share, and assuming that, we're changing votes or doing all these, crazy things that people think we do. So, but you want to respond. I don't want to just ignore that. So every single one that came through, I want to respond, explain the way things are conducted, the transactions that happen. I mean, all of that. So, yeah, a lot of interesting things turned over to the sheriff's office this election.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to echo what everyone said and expand on Kelly's comments specifically to Fredericksburg. So in 2020, in the city of Fredericksburg, early voting starts 45 days prior to each election. We had 4 elections, 2 of which were extended by a governor's order. We had 208 days of voting in the city of Fredericksburg. For 3 of those elections, we had 2 full-time staffers and a part-time staff person. Obviously, the pandemic injected a level of unknown. Particularly, it's kind of hard to remember when it first unfolded, which was it felt like days after the March 3rd presidential primary. Well, we had already started voting for the May election and were utterly bereft of guidance or the ability to know how to handle our duties. Kelly mentioned the mental, physical, and emotional toll that it took on people who work in election management. It's real. It occurred and continues to have ramifications to this day, including the youngest member of my staff leaving after the election was over and saying, "This is not what I want to do." The threats, the accusations, the hostility, all very real. And you mix that up in that we are nonpartisan administrators of elections, but humans nonetheless. And the last minute legislation falling in late in the summer prior to early voting, lawsuits that changed the composition of ballots, in order for us to meet the demand of getting all our by mail ballots out, it was about 3 or 4 days of 17-hour days of us working. And then it was endless. That was the pace. But for our office, and like the other registrars, that comes on the heels of either 2 other or 3 other elections with skeletal staff. And I think immense responsibility that is not anything I am willing ever to do again professionally. I mean that very seriously. I've made that commitment to myself and my family. So it has a legitimate impact on the individuals who do this for a living.
Absolutely. The onslaught of absentee by mail, literally for 2 weeks, we had, because most things were shut down, a lot of park staff, part-timers who weren't able to get hours, we swore them in and they were folding and stuffing ballots and putting, I mean, anybody who had a minute in this county played a very vital role in the ability for us to be able to even get that first mail. It was unbelievable. Sleepless nights. I mean, my youngest 2, they go to bed at 8 and they're like, Mom, why do I always see your lights when you leave after you put us to bed? Because I would get home, spend a little time with the kids, and I'd come back to work for 3 or 4 or 5 more hours just to get it all done, because there was literally not enough time to get everything done. And then throw on top of that, in Stafford, we added a satellite location in addition to our voting location here at the government center. And we had never done that before. That was a whole new world, trying to figure out the logistics of that. It was all very overwhelming. And most days I thought, what on earth am I doing? And how are we going to do this? And by the grace of God, we did. It all seemed to come together, and we got it all done. But it was very difficult. And those last minute changes, we have these absentee ballots ready to go, but wait, there's this one thing. So we have to change the instructions, and then we have to put another insert to tell them this, and then we have to do that, and we have to add this, and oh wait, now it just, when we actually had to drive to North Carolina to pick up our ballots from the printer because there was not time. There literally would not be enough time. We would have gotten them on Wednesday. They would have been out on Friday, and we had over 16,000. So we had to drive to North Carolina on a weekend to pick up the ballots for it to even be possible, because of ballot configurations and who's going to be on it and who's not. And this last minute lawsuit's going to change this and that. So it was extremely difficult, extremely difficult. And then we had another election on January 5th, a month after the November election. They're like, I was on vacation finally. And they're like, bam, you're going to have a special election. So, it was a very trying period of time. Absolutely.
And so in our locality, my biggest issue was space. We just did not have the space.
Yes.
I don't even have a place that I could have done a satellite office. And this is my 4th presidential election. And I have to say that out of all of the elections on election day, this was the most calm election that we had actually on election day, but coming up to it was brutal. And like Mark, I lost 2 of my staff members after this election. They just decided that they didn't, and they had been with me. One had been with me for 9 years and one had been with me for 7. And this election, they just said, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. It was constant. We voted in our small locality. I think Mark and I are probably about the same size, and then Kelly and Ann are about the same. But in our small locality, we had 7,156 people walk through my office. And if you've ever been to my office, you'll know that it's very, very small. So we had voting booths out in the hallway. We had voting booths and it just, but it flowed. But like Anna and Kelly and Mark, coming in on Saturdays and Sundays just to get bags packed and just to get our supplies ready. And I can remember our ballots that came in, and just to get them packaged up to put to the precincts. I came in on a Sunday because I had nowhere to work, so we could, spread out and do all this. But it was this was a brutal one, because I'm not really sure. I think when the laws were put into place for the early voting, the first law that came was 7 days. And so we were preparing for the 7 days, and never did we dream that it would have been for the whole 45 days. We were thinking, okay, well, if they expanded, it might be 14, it may be 21 at the most, but we are the only state that has 45 days, no excuse. And it's a long process. It really is. But we all made it through, persevered. And I think that going forward, we know some of the things that we have to do to continue to make another election better. And that's what we do.
Let me ask you about Election Day itself. What were your largest challenges on Election Day? Did you have, I know there were, even though a lot of people voted early, a lot of people didn't. And did you have long lines? Did you have difficult people to deal with? Did you have, heaven forbid, any actual physical threats, any of that sort of thing on Election Day itself?
No, basically, in our locality, like Kelly, we voted almost 55% of our population early. So we had about an 80-some% turnout, maybe 85%. So you're figuring there's only like 30-some% that only went to the polls. But no, there was no lines. We had no confrontation. I used our deputies here in King George to kind of patrol and go into the polling places and just to make sure that nothing, and there was nothing that happened on Election Day. Unlike 2016, when the lines were just out the door and we had issues with machines and all this, there was nothing on Election Day here. This was, like I said, this is my 4th presidential, and this was probably the easiest Election Day on a presidential that we've had. But like I said, working up to it was a little difficult.
That was about
Right,
the
I would
same
agree.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kelly.
That was about the same with us. It was definitely one of the better election days because so many had voted early, but we did have some scuffles. We had deputies patrolling, but we did have some that we had to call in, and it was mostly the party people outside talking to the voters that were going into the precinct, and there were some heated arguments, but operations wise, everything was great.
Yeah, I didn't hear of any problems like that in Stafford. We had deputies that they were assigned districts, and I honestly, I'm in contact with the sheriff's office. They have their plan, they execute their plan, and I know a little bit about what their plan is, but I do not know all the details of the extent that they do, which is that, they do a lot on Election Day, and they're out early before the polls open. And they're there until the people leave, patrolling the polling places, and they get information about what the turnout numbers might be like on Election Day, so they can know, well, this is going to be a busier one. We want to, make sure we're swinging by that one maybe a little more often. But I didn't hear of any scuffles from any election officials. If they did, they were able to take care of it all, and I wasn't burdened with it, but I don't think we had anything at all. We had a couple of calls about maybe somebody saying, telling people one thing or another, and we'd send an electoral board member to the locality, and then people there were like, no, that's not happening. So we had a very easy day on election day, which was nice. As with the 45 days preceding being the way they were, it was nice to have a smooth election day.
I agree with what everyone said. Diane, one of the things you kind of referenced, which I think it might be important for people to know, is, Anna just expanded on it. We hear, and I don't know if the other registrars experience this, but a member who's is responsible for this district for the state police stopped by our office to let them know that they would be available and around on election day. We do coordinate regardless of the election with the City of Fredericksburg Police, Sheriff, and Fire Department. Also, like Anna referenced, to know, here we think this is what the turnout might be like. Here are our busier places. Here are some of the issues that may have arisen during early voting. One of the issues that came up from one of the major political parties was in reference to guns in the polling places. That's always a question that comes in from not really much from individuals, but from interested parties. And there is a concern about safety and suppression or violence at the polling places. But for this election, there was no indication of that in the city of Fredericksburg. And there are, the proper authorities are involved in the process to be able to quickly respond if an issue like that arises. So.
And I'm sure, as most people know, the legislature passed a law this year that guns are no longer going to be permitted within 40 feet around the entrance of a polling location. So I guess that's some comfort, although obviously you can't prepare for every circumstance. What are your expectations for the 2021 elections, given that, as far as we know, all of the requirements for the upcoming elections are finished, and assuming there isn't another last minute special session, but how do you think it's going to be different or the same in 2021?
Well, COVID's not going to disappear, and we'll continue to work within our means with that. New laws, like you mentioned, they take effect July 1st. And I feel like as the years pass, there are increasing amounts of election laws that are introduced. Unfortunately, I feel that our legislators rarely reach out to the election administrators for insight or ideas when creating or passing these laws. Because I'm sure some of my comrades here, we read some of these laws and we're like, what? So, I've emailed some of them like, let's get together, let's meet, let's talk about this. I mean, I'm sure they're hearing from their constituents, but we would be, I would think, valuable as well on the other side of the law. We work through constant changes on policy from the Department of Elections. That of course stresses our budgets and the staff. I think what is most upsetting is the obstacle of confidence in the election administration moving forward. And I'm sure I speak for others when I say we spend many evenings, again, responding to messages or trying to educate the public to help that confidence factor. Just all the nuts and bolts of how we protect our election tabulations and the intricate moving parts of the election. We want to try to share the information we can, not anything security wise, that we want to keep to ourselves. But I think moving forward, that's something that's not going to go away, that we're going to continue to have to work on.
I think I agree completely with Kelly on her points. For 2021, I quite frankly think that there'll be a noticeable reduction in voter participation. I think, obviously every 4 years, the presidential election is a high water mark. So there may be naturally less engagement and involvement in elections this year. I think that one of the things that, and I don't know how an administrator really influences this much, is we're just part of a little speck on a kind of a national conversation whose tone and tenor has deteriorated so terribly that it's sometimes, for those interested in voting, it meets when they vote or attempt to vote or confidence in voting. And that has a real impact. It has an impact in potential legislation, in new legislation, in response to that legislation. I don't think that's going to end. I don't see that going away overnight. So I think the intensity of the presidential election will not occur again. But all the new administrative changes that were the late summer session of the General Assembly, which influenced largely absentee voting for November, will now become law. And so they will have an administrative impact, which will require more effort by offices to do things like manage a drop box in accordance with code, as well as policy guidance. Ballot curing will be in place. So there'll be changes that will come up. And the pandemic is a very real piece of our lives and will continue to be. And I'm sure all of us feel a measure of responsibility to keep our staffs safe, but also our voters, to instill confidence that they can vote safely if they choose to vote in person.
Anna, did you want to?
No, I mean, I think they're right. I think the laws are constantly changing, and Kelly's right. It oftentimes seems like that no one who writes these laws and votes on these laws, even if we speak to them, they don't really seem to listen to our concerns or consider them. So we just have to work with what they give us. I think voters don't understand sometimes that we don't make the laws. It's not a Stafford County law. It's not a Fredericksburg City law or a Spotsylvania law. It's a state law. I think also where problems arise is it's a state law, but each locality implements it in a way that works for that locality. I had a satellite office, so you could go to 2 locations to vote. The others did not. Fairfax has 1 million. Some of them are open on extra Saturdays. So we have laws that we have to follow, but then implementation, as long as it follows the law, is up to the locality. So you might be hearing, your friend in Fredericksburg, prior to November, they had a drop box outside their office. We didn't have one in Stafford. So we got why don't we have one? Why don't you have one? We tried to work with them, call us, we'll come out to your car, we'll get it. You don't have to get out, you don't have to expose yourself, we get it. We just don't have one. We had one in November, and we'll have a more permanent one now that it's law. So you adjust, but I think because all localities do things differently because of the size, the scope of their operation, things are done a little differently. So I think that can be confusing sometimes to voters as well. Why is it here one way here and why is it not there? And everyone is following the rule of law, but they're just implementing it a little differently. And sometimes we're doing it because we're not getting guidance. So we're just sort of, okay, or we'll call each other. How are you going to do this? What have you found to be the best way to do that? We heavily rely on each other to figure out the best way to implement these new laws.
And I would like to piggyback on Kelly, Mark, and Anna. Basically, my hope is that by the next presidential election, we will maybe have installed or instilled a little bit of back voter confidence with the elections that we're going to be running up until we do the presidential election again. For a number of reasons, we're going to do we'll still have the 45 days early voting. We'll still have the drop boxes, but I think we're going to see a little more of an increase in participation for the governor's race than we did in the last governor's race. And that gives us an opportunity, again, to instill voter confidence to the voter that we know what we're doing, that there is no fraud, things like this. And again, so then in 2021 or 2022 and 2023, and hopefully by 2024, going into another presidential cycle, we won't have these problems that we found in 2020. So that's what my hope is. Again, being, I'm probably the one that's been here the longest and seeing the trend of the voting. We are getting more participation in the voting. And I'm just hoping that after this 2020 election, that it doesn't go down, that we can instill some more, participation and the confidence to the voter.
Thank you. And let me ask a final question. It sounds like from what you've all said that there's lots of education that needs to be done to voters, not only to voters, but to state legislators who are drafting laws. And the question was, how can the League of Women Voters be of the most assistance to registrars in future elections? Clearly, you've mentioned a couple of areas where we really have our work cut out for us to make sure people understand what the laws are. Are there other things, or do you want to expand on that a little bit and what we could do to be helpful to you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to your group, because you do so much for us at the General Assembly by speaking up and helping to understand some of the laws that they're trying to put into place, and calling us and asking us, what do you think of this? Or how do you, what about this one? The biggest thing I think is to help promote not only registration, but elections, of how they're run. If you all have questions, like last year when we were getting phone calls about, why is my ballot not showing up? I voted it and now it's not showing up on the, on your site yet. Well, it's a process, it doesn't just automatically show up. Or the process of, I came into your office and voted, and how come now it's showing that I absentee voted? Things like that. And the reason being is because the system doesn't differentiate between an absentee and an in-person voter. It's all going to show up under an absentee, but the voters don't know that. But people, getting that out there to the public would be very helpful. And the more resources that we can get the information out, the more the general public is going to understand. And I think it's going to help our jobs a lot, to make it a lot easier as well, to help field some of those phone calls.
Right. And urge them to, if they have questions, go to official sites, Department of Elections website, our website, call us. Don't go to Facebook and look up some group on Facebook and think what they're saying is what is, because it's usually not. There are official places to go, and that is the best place to go. And Marie, hi Marie, approached me with some information that you all wanted to put on your website to help get out voter, information to voters, which is fabulous. I really appreciated that, because the more accurate information you all can provide, and the easier to understand, and these are the specific issues we need you to get out. And that was so helpful. And please, anything you want to get out there that you're thinking about, let us know. We'll look at it, and we can say, well, maybe trim it down here, or put this in there, or this is where they need to go to do that. And working together, it has to be a group effort. I mean, it just does. And working together gets the accurate information out to more people, which is a big help.
Yeah, I think what I've found is that kind of the repetition of the same, it can get monotonous and boring, but basic knowledge of how to register, but then transitioning into, for the city of Fredericksburg, we have a very dynamic voter registration rolls because of the University of Mary Washington. We have a constant state of change. And one thing people don't know, particularly when new laws come in, how do I access my ballot? Can I vote by mail? Can I vote early? Those are newer questions, which it appears are going to be constant, information saying, here's how you do that. But in large turnout elections, it's maybe surprising the number of people who present themselves to vote and don't know that they'll be asked to state their name or address, or either provide a form of ID or be required to sign essentially an affidavit of affirmation of identity. We had a large number of voters come in unable to state the address at which they were registered. These aren't things we do. We ask because, we're really, we're doing it because it's law, and it is a check to assure that the proper person is casting their ballot. That basic voter preparation. If you want to vote, you got to be registered. Be aware of the deadlines that are around elections. When you vote, if you vote in person early or you go on election day, you're going to be expected to provide some information. If you vote by mail, here is that process. That needs to be in a constant state of communication. And the other thing for a very micro level communication is, and this is mostly between the city of Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania and Stafford, is there are plenty of people, dynamic area, lots of people moving in and moving out and moving around. I know in probably, I'd say 10% of the voters that presented themselves to vote early in 2020 were not registered in the city of Fredericksburg. They came to the wrong place. So Anna's, referencing consistent authorized websites to get the information that make people's ability to register and access their ballot is critical. And I'd also like to thank the league because the annual, kind of guide is the best consolidated piece of information that we ever get, and I use it all the time. And so anyway, thank you all.
Yeah, what Mark, that guide is very helpful. We use those a lot too. And like Mark and everyone said, any and all voter education that you provide is appreciated. The more the voter understands on how to cast their ballot, how it's tabulated, it'll only help the election comprehension. Assisting them to understand their own responsibilities would be helpful if we can do that in a nice way. How they need to register, to casting their ballot, updating their registration as needed, IDs that are required to vote, all those little checks and balances are helpful. But yeah, everything everyone else said would be welcomed.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's the end of our league board's list of questions. We have several questions in the chat box, and if all the registrars are fine, we'll and Debbie, if you can do this for the person who asked the question, could you unmute that person and let them ask their question? Paula Calais. Would you ask your question that's in the chat box? Okay, there you go.
Is it working now? For the questions for the GRs, what are your opinions about the pros and cons of having the 45 days of early voting versus your mail-in voting? So I'm an election officer in Spotsy, And we had lots and lots of voters who really liked the 45 days of early voting. People coming in who said when it's on one day, typically they can't come and vote because they might be truck drivers or whatever their professions may be. Seemed like they really, I would almost say, obviously, there are obviously people who came in, preferred the 45 days of early voting. I know it taxes you guys as general registrars, but that they seem to prefer that. I won't say for mail-in voting because obviously people who mailed in voting didn't come into the offices. But what are your opinions about those?
I love the early voting because even with the early voting and the mail-in, mostly all of my mail-in voters either dropped them off in the drop box or brought their ballots back in to want to vote early. And I just, even though it was taxing and it was tiring, it was good to see that many people come out. I really did like I always liked the people coming in to vote. They knew that they could see that their ballot was being cast, and it was voter confidence to them as well.
Right. And we always had the 45 days. You just had to have an excuse prior to
Right.
this. So we were used to operating for the full 45 days.
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest issues this time around were the vast amounts of people who asked for ballots to be mailed to them, and then they came and voted in person.
Mhm.
So it was doing a lot of extra work.
Right.
I think as COVID dies down and people adjust and people things sort of level out and a new normal, we get to that point. That won't happen as much, and people will realize, well, I don't need to have the ballot mailed to me. I have 45 days, I can go do it. So I think the more COVID dies down a little and the more they get used to this, I can go vote without an excuse, that'll die down. But I mean, we were always doing it. It was just amplified, and we did have to open the satellite, but I had excellent election officials who staffed both locations. So it worked very well. And it did make election day itself far, far easier.
I agree with Laurie and Anna. And Anna brought up a good point that this is kind of going back to the question you previously asked, as far as voter education goes. That is a terrible habit for voters to get into. It was exceptional because of the pandemic and the dynamic of this election, but requesting absentee ballots by mail and then bringing them back or not bringing them back injects a level of confusion into administration, not just cost. So if you want to vote by mail, you should, and I believe you are right to have confidence in that process. If you don't, come in person early or vote on election day. That was a real barn burner this
Yes.
time around.
Well, especially when we were paying the 45 cents for, or the whatever the postage was for them to send them back to us.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. And we use stamps, and we would have some dropped off in the ballot box, so they didn't need to use their stamp. So they took the stamp off the return envelope
Yeah,
so they could use it for something else. So,
us too, yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
just.
Mine didn't get that lucky. Mine was metered through.
I do think though that one thing about kind of the mail versus in person. I think the scope of the issue is again resources that Virginia went from kind of full stop to open-ended very quickly. So the 45 days of early voting is in person or by mail. And I think it'll be based on the locality, whether or not, I agree with Anna that there will be a number of people that will revert back to in-person either on election day or early. But I do think there will be, in my locality, there will be a substantial number of people based on applications I've already received for the elections in 2021 that will stick to voting by mail. And so the by mail versus early, quite frankly, prior to this year was a big 100% vote by mail. My thought was that was good, as some other states do. I don't think that's reasonable for Virginia. I certainly don't think that that's reasonable now in the current climate. But I think early voting in toto is very beneficial to administrators and most importantly to the voters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I definitely think it is benefits the voters. The mailed ballots, you know, like they've all said, we've been doing it for so long. There's so many things that go into it that the general public doesn't know, the checks and balances we have to make sure they get the ballot, that we receive the correct ballot back, the way it's processed and checked into the system. There's a lot more work that goes into our mailed ballots than, you know, folks that vote early. That being said, I feel like, and I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there should just be some other stipulations to it. So it's not the bombardment of all these folks that want it mailed to their house, but then they're like, well, I'll just go vote in person. And we want to track all of that. We want that ballot back. We want it marked in our system correctly. So there's no way, you know, an extra vote anything could happen. You know, we want everything tracked, T's dotted, I's dotted, T's crossed, everything that goes into it. So I feel like there should be more to it. I just don't know what the answer is. Somebody smarter than me needs to do that.
Well, then when you question them, and then it becomes a disenfranchisement of their, you know, of their vote when they don't bring their ballot back to you, and you're like, but we're trying to protect you as the voter to make sure that, you know, so, and they don't understand the process. But I agree with you, Kelly. I think there needs to be something more to it.
Fran Larkins had a couple of questions in the chat box. You want to unmute her, Debbie? And Fran, you ask a couple, one or two of your questions, please.
Sure. I'd just like to make a point about the previous thing that you've been talking about the mailed ballots. A lot of people were very concerned about the United States Post Office ability to deliver their ballots. And hopefully you won't have that problem again in the future, because they just didn't have confidence in it. And they felt like that was so important that they needed to go in person.
And I totally agree with that. But my question to some of them was, I mailed you the ballot and you got it. Why did you not think that it would not get back to me? I guess is the what I ask them. You know, I mean, if I'm mailing it to you and you're getting it, what is making you so distrustful that I'm not going to get it back? And that was just a question, you know, that in my mind that I was thinking, why is there that distrust?
Yeah. Well, people weren't getting their medications and this type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. And I was when I was thinking that, you know, so.
Not to mention there were lots of people on social media telling them that their absentee ballots weren't secure and, you know, feeding that fire. So
again, our media.
Yeah. My question is that how I think part of the problem, or seemed to be some of the problem with this last election, was that the absentee ballots came in, the count on the absentee ballots was not available. I don't know exactly how it worked, but we didn't get the absentee ballots that were, a large percentage of them were Democrats. We didn't get them until after the day of voting ballots. So is there a change in how that's going to be, how those are going to be reported and reported?
That we reported those based on how the Department of Elections told us to do that, and we had to continue counting ballots that came in through the mail or through drop boxes until 11 p.m. So once you do that, then you can shut down your machines and tally everything, and that takes, when you have 10,000-15,000 votes in the machine that has to be all the, you know, the reports run and printed out, that takes a while, and then you get it in the system. So I think that is probably, and I could be wrong, something that the Department of Elections is probably tweaking. A lot of this was new to them too, and they didn't know. So they just said, everybody in the state will do it until this time, and then everybody will cut it off and then do from there, and then you'll start over the next day. So I think perhaps that will change for upcoming elections on how they, the guidelines for reporting those totals.
When you also have the 3 days after the election up until Friday for the ballots to come in. that we're still tallying.
Right.
Yeah, so there was this was almost all a result of a couple things. The new law, which allowed unfettered access to voting by mail, and then the guidance that came in the late General Assembly session. And it depends on size a lot. I mean, Kelly and Anna are huge localities. We did what's called pre-processing, which I think the other registrars did as well, which is under law, you can have officers of election, count ballots or process absentee ballots prior to election day. The reporting part, you see there was an intention, which I think was achieved, that we want to ensure people can vote safely, but can vote by mail regardless of COVID. So they put in the drop box. Those drop boxes were also required to be at every single polling place. That means we can't get those ballots until after that polling place closes on election day. We can't close down machines intermittently. Results of an election cannot be tabulated until the close of polls on election day. If I can't imagine what Kelly and Anna were facing in the tens of thousands of ballots that needed to be counted. So the 11 o'clock deadline was an administrative function the Department of Elections put on. But as Lori referenced, the law requires us to accept certain ballots until Friday at noon following election day. There does not appear, and Lori might be able to correct me on this, that there was any legislation that passed this particular session that changes those things. There was a bill, and my understanding is it will likely come up next year, which will address the issue that you brought up more specifically. It's a bill that deals with the reporting of absentee by mail ballots, but also the reporting of ballots by precinct or ward, which we don't have the ability to do now. I understand they went away from making those changes this year because they realized they had slopped on enough changes. And the voter database that Virginia has currently, referred to as VERIS, is going to go away, and it doesn't have any of that functionality. So we can't, if a law was passed for us to report in the manner described, and I think desired by some, we don't have the ability to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want me to do my other question, Diane?
Sure, go ahead.
How do you anticipate the 2021 redistricting will impact your jobs? And looking ahead, are you making any plans or doing anything differently for that, or it's going to be a big change for you all, I assume?
Well, and one of the laws that came into play, I think, was it last year, and guys correct me, is that if we have any split precincts, that we have to undo them. So for example, in King George, we have a senatorial split between the 4th and the 28th. I have 2 precincts that affects. So somewhere along the line in my redistricting, I'm going to have to either have a new have a new polling place, or move those people somewhere to get them all into one precinct, like all the 4th into the 28th and all the 28th into the 4th, so we don't have splits. But we haven't even looked at that until the redistricting starts. So, depending upon, I know Mark's locality's grown, I know Stafford's grown, I know Fredericksburg's or Spotsy's grown, and we've grown. The biggest challenge that we will have is if we've grown, we have no place for polling places. I have no buildings or anything to put any polling places. We've used all the schools so far, and we're just within that mile boundary line is the issue that we have because we're so rural, that even when we were trying to do the June primary last year and do the drive-through like Mark did in Fredericksburg City, I could not have all of my precincts in one space because of that mile boundary line, because of the ruralness of our county. So if I have a county, if I have to put a precinct in, say, Monroe precinct, I have nowhere in that boundary line to put it. So those are going to be the issues that we're going to be facing right here in King George.
Right. We'll be getting 10 to 12 new precincts. I have no idea where they'll go. We have several split precincts right now that the redistricting committee, the Board of Supervisors, is going to have to figure out what to do with that. I'm glad that's their job and not mine, because it's going to be difficult. I have no idea how things are going to change or how things are going to move, but there's going to be a lot of changes. Like I said, with 10 to 12 new precincts, it adds on, you know, that much more that has to be done for election day. But the county has grown substantially.
That's the same with Spotsylvania. It'll probably be about 10 new precincts. We're out of our 27, about half are split. We're split every which way but loose. I mean, House, Senate, Congressional. I've got all of the splits. So I'm looking forward to making the changes in the precincts where we do not have to have, you know, however many different ballot styles because of all of our splits, and then reporting them correctly from the precincts. So I'm the same as Anna. We're going to have quite a few new precincts, and I don't know in what buildings we'll be able to use as a precinct. You know, the lines, it'll be quite an undertaking, but I'm looking forward to just having precincts that aren't split.
Well, now I'm completely terrified because I've never been through one. So, so it sounds like it will be a challenge. I really have not been through one. I've, you know, heard a lot about it. And so my understanding is some of the changes will be significant. But I'm going to be a first timer on this go round. So
It
It'll
sounds
all work out.
it sounds like a lot of your expectations are going to have budgetary implications. Should citizens be aware that these things cost money? Should the league be thinking about what we can do to support increases in your budgets? Are you, I mean, I guess the first question is, are you requesting additions to your budgets to handle all of these things you've talked about? And if so, can we help with that?
Right. In Stafford, at least, we don't have, you know, the Board of Supervisors has been very good about meeting our budgetary requests and giving us the money that we need. I think what would help everyone in every locality across the state is to ask Richmond to give the localities money to support our offices. I think that they enact these laws that cost a lot of money, and then they don't give us any support, and they just say to the localities, sorry about your luck, this is what you have to do, and you have to figure out how to pay for it. And these things aren't optional. We have to do them, and they have to be funded, and they don't. I know when they first passed the early voting that was only going to be 7 days, they had put money in the budget to help offset some costs of implementing this. And then when they extended it to 45 days, they took that money away. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the way it went. So they don't support localities with any assistance in implementing the new laws that they passed that do have a tremendous impact on budgets. And especially, I believe, Lori, probably smaller localities, it's a bigger impact, I think, and it's more of a struggle to get the money than it is in some of the larger localities.
Mm-hmm.
And answer to your question about the budget, most of our budgets are finished for this year, is my understanding. I know ours is, and they're in the stages of working on it right now. So we have already put extra in for the redistricting, thinking that the redistricting was going to happen early April, June timeframe. If the redistricting doesn't happen until September, October timeframe, then that means that our budget goes into work in November, December timeframe. So again, depending upon when the final budgets will be done. They may not be done until January of 2022. We will be able to put more money in there, seeing where it is right now. But again, it's always a challenge of you know, going to our board of supervisors or our county administrators and saying we need this, because even though we're a vital part of the locality, we don't bring any revenue in. And so, you know, they see us as always just asking for money and not bringing anything in, you know, to the locality. So, you know, that's just, you know, that's just the nature of what we do. But so I think that not knowing when we're actually going to be doing the redistricting, I just sent out the link to my colleagues that it's supposed to happen in September, but we don't know, you know, if that actually is or not. So, but thank you. Yes, any kind of help that you guys can help support us in this would be great. You know, like I said, letting the citizens know, going before the state board, and you know, so.
I agree with
Thank
everything
you.
that's been said. The city of Fredericksburg has been very supportive of this office. I would just like to bring it back to my experience prior to this office in the courts. So the circuit court has a circuit court clerk. I came over here not knowing what to expect. What Virginia provides the courts, which it doesn't provide this office, is an entire IT network, which houses their databases they do their business with, and all the support that comes with that, as well as support, money support for supplies and required purchases to administrate their duties, and to support the individual clerk and deputy clerk salaries. I think the only thing Virginia provides its locality is financial support for a portion of the registrar's salary and the electoral board's compensation. That was really quite shocking to me. I should have been a better informed citizen prior to taking this position. But just to give you a juxtaposition, look, I think government at every level invests in things it prioritizes. I think we do that in our own lives. And I am curious as to the lack of investment above the local level in election administration. And it can always improve.
Okay, one more. Tina Pruitt, you want to ask your question, and would you unmute her, Debbie?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Actually, my question was pretty much what is Virginia, the state and counties doing to address your concerns, and what can we as citizens do? And I think since I put that question or those two questions into the chat through the conversation, just as we just were, you have been addressing those concerns. And I was thinking it might be helpful if it's something that you guys would be willing to do, would be to just consolidate your concerns and maybe provide them to the league. And we as citizens and as a league could look at them and see how we could address them. I mean, I know we've been collecting the questions and everything that's been raised during this conversation, but maybe just having a list from all of you as to ways you think that we could, you know, how we should focus our help for you guys, that might be helpful, just in case we misinterpreted something or we don't have the priority correct in terms of your need. And since you have been addressing all these things, I just want to say I live in Spotsylvania, and I did, with both my league hat and also as a redistricting amendment proponent, I was at the polls for many days working outside, and I was just amazed and so pleased and proud of how you guys handled the elections. And I I just want to point out two things that I thought were really wonderful that you did. And maybe, I don't know that we'll ever be in a situation for good or bad like we were in 2020. But some of the things that you did that just really seemed to keep the temperature level down and to keep the mood festive and positive is you would always clap for people who came who were new voters and help them to take pictures, even with COVID. And also, this is just one thing. I mean, every single day, everyone was wearing a smile. Everybody was positive. And I think that that constant positivity kept, you know, the anxiety down that people may have been feeling at different times. But even on Halloween, all of you guys were wearing costumes and things. And I just want to say these were brilliant tactics or just inspirations that you had that seemed to really help keep the mood of the people participating in a positive range. And I just want to thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because it's, you know, we don't get to hear a lot of that kind of feedback, and I get minimal credit for that because I did handpick the election officials that I had at my satellite office, and they are fantastic individuals themselves, but they came together and worked as a team beautifully, and they did an amazing job. I agree. I mean, we're so close. I mean, you know how close our satellite office is to our office. So some of my staff, we were back and forth many times during the day, but they were fantastic individuals that operated that, and thank you for those kind words. I will pass it on, and I appreciate it.
I just want to mention one point and remind our league members, I'm not sure the registrars know, but our State League of Women Voters is going to be approving a updated election policy this year in May at our convention that will support a lot of the things that have already been passed into law. But most importantly, I think from what we've heard today is they will be supporting significant increased funding for local governments for the responsibilities of the registrar's office and related expenses. So we hope to be able to, when that's finalized, be able to let you know about what that policy, final policy language is, and that we will be working to support that and advocate for that in the next session of the General Assembly. So that's one small piece of what you've talked about in terms of what we can do to help. I know we could go on all day with more questions, but I want to respect your schedules and thank you all for sharing your time this morning, your expertise, and for all of the work that you do, and for all of the burnout that creates. We are appreciative as an organization, and as Tina mentioned, as individuals. I think we all were impressed. So many of us, I don't know, just hearing from my own neighbors, were happy to have satellite locations. I'm sure that information didn't get back to you on how happy they were to have it, but they shared that with a lot of folks. And now, of course, they expected it all the time. So I guess that's success. I think all of us this morning have gained a much greater appreciation for the work that you do and the challenges that you face. We look forward to working with you all as we go into the upcoming year and into future elections. And please do let us know, and we'll be communicating with you, I'm sure, as to what we can do to help each other. And again, we appreciate so much all of your assistance to the league.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.